If I showed you this song, or this song, even if you were blindfolded, you'd be able to recognize these themes from your childhood. But who is behind the creation of gaming's most iconic soundtracks? Koji Kondo, born in 1961, is a Japanese composer for Nintendo. He has written music for the company for over 4 decades, ushering in the sound of the world's biggest games and providing counsel for the next generation of Nintendo composers. Born in Nagoya, Japan, Koji Kondo started his early life with music at the age of 5 years old, where he would take classes for his electric organ all the way through high school. He attended the Osaka University of the Arts, where he studied music. And one of his favorite pastimes was going to the arcade, where he would play the iconic games like Pong and the recently released Donkey Kong.
It's Donkey Kong, the arcade sensation, and now you can play it at home.
Hang on, sweetheart! I'm gonna save ya!
Now you can play Donkey Kong on your ColecoVision.
This is where Koji Kondo would find his passion. In an interview with Wired, he would divulge his thoughts on gaming soundtrack in the early arcade era. When I was playing these games, I'd never really thought about how I could change things to make it better, but I was really interested in them because they were really the only place where you could find these kinds of sound creation. So interested that it led me towards video games, but I didn't feel like I could do any better. I was just interested in the whole process. Kondo would be enamored by the sound of video games, and while keeping his expectations low about his compositions, he would really start his work for gaming much sooner than anticipated. In the jobs board at his university, there would be a listing for a company called Nintendo, and after one employment exam, he was hired by the new gaming company. This time for Nintendo, much of the video game market had been in a collapse with the video game crash of 1983. Many were not enamored with video games, and consoles being a household item. For Koji Kondo and Nintendo, there was an uphill battle to defy those assumptions that video games were a passing fad or a cash grab. The publishing of these video games needed to be flawless from top to bottom. Nintendo looked at this problem and implemented the seal of quality, which they only gave to very few publishers for outstanding game design from gameplay to sound. Koji Kondo started working at Nintendo with some of their earliest projects. In 1984, he would work on the music for the game Punch-Out and Devil's World, alongside Akito Nakatsuka. In 1985, he would continue his work by making the music for NES Soccer, Arm Wrestling, and Kung Fu. And in the same year, he would work on his most iconic soundtrack. Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System. And as if that wasn't enough, he would follow it up next year with the debut of his next soundtrack with The Legend of Zelda, and Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. In the span of 3 years, Koji Kondo had gone from appreciating the music in the arcades to composing the most iconic themes in gaming's history, and the sales numbers showed it. The seal of quality had done wonders for the Nintendo Entertainment System. The game console sold 40 million, and bundled with it was Super Mario Bros. And the following year, The Legend of Zelda would sell 6.5 million copies. From the music to the gameplay, Nintendo was a massive success, and the success of the NES would not stop there. Nintendo would follow up their lineup of games with sequels in the span of 2 years: Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, Super Mario Bros. 2, and 3, and would occupy Koji Kondo's time. Nintendo needed to follow up the NES with a successor as other gaming companies started to implement 16-bit instead of 8-bits. The TurboGrafx 16 and the Sega Mega Drive arrived in the market 2 years earlier than Nintendo and had better graphics and sound. But Nintendo would not be outshined. They would release the Super Famicom in Japan in 1990. and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in the United States in 1991. Koji Kondo was once again asked to compose a soundtrack for The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Koji Kondo was able to deliver a beautiful soundtrack on the SNES due to the new technology brought forward by Sony Entertainment's new chip. And this would start a partnership that would later devolve into a rivalry. But that's a story for another day. Koji Kondo, in an interview with Wired, would explain the inherent differences in working between Zelda and the compositions for Mario. With Mario, the music is inspired with game controls, and its purpose is to heighten the feeling of how a game controls. With Zelda, I was trying to enhance the atmosphere of the environments and location. The sound of Mario is kind of like popular music, and Zelda is like a kind of music that you've never heard before. So I try to incorporate many different types of music to create the otherworldly feeling. Koji Kondo would continue his work making music for Yoshi's Island and the sound effects for Star Fox. But in 1996, the gaming world was about to change forever.
Compromise, we will live the game through our hands. We will be in control of something. We will change the system.
Nintendo had their highly anticipated Ultra 64 project, and with the release of a new Super Mario Bros. Game, Super Mario 64. Koji Kondo came up with some of the most iconic themes in the franchise to use in the new era of 3D Mario. Mario 64 has since become one of the most beloved and played games in the history of gaming, with it being ported to the Nintendo DS and on the Switch. Koji Kondo's work in the 64 era would not stop there, as he would be tasked to return to the Zelda franchise for two projects in The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, both using the Peruvian instrument of the ocarina, and delivering timeless classics like Koji Kondo's role would diminish over the years, but would oversee other projects for Nintendo where he's still at now. His legacy continues with the involvement of other games like Four Swords Adventure, the sound director for New Super Mario Bros., the composer for Twilight Princess, and minor roles in Skyward Sword and Super Mario 3D World, as well as compositions for Mario Odyssey and Mario Wonder. His involvement in Twilight Princess would be the first time in Zelda franchise history where the soundtrack would be orchestrated. Koji Kondo would go on an interview with Kizaiko and comment that they wanted a dynamic sound for the main title theme. The soundtrack would not be fully orchestrated, but the orchestra would be used when the drama was at a high point. Later on in the same interviews, the goals of the project would set to be to elevate the sound design to the level of the visuals, as Twilight Princess would remain one of the most realistic looking Zeldas until the release of Breath of the Wild. We can see Koji Kondo's involvement diminish over time, and while there isn't one reason why, Nintendo has just grown as a company over the years and hired more talent, although his influence has not wavered over the years. Kondo is still at the forefront of Nintendo's music department, with involvement with several Mario projects and spin-offs. It's obvious that Koji Kondo has had a massive influence on video game soundtracks. Since the first time people heard the new Super Mario Bros. Theme song, his influence on music has surprisingly extended further from the gaming space, with musicians like Imagine Dragons and Grammy-nominated composers like Austin Wintory and Christopher Tin citing him as inspirations towards their own musical journey, really focusing on his melodic tunes, enhanced storytelling in music, and soundtrack design that not many people were doing in the 80s quite like him. Koji Kondo's legacy is one that will be in the history books forever. His work in the most iconic games in the history of video games, and the inspiration to a whole new generation of composers, artists, and genres from Zelda to Mario, the ground theme to Midna's Lament. Koji Kondo is one of music's most iconic composers.